Hey there, friends. Last time we were together in the shop, we made this very simple box with the swivel lid, actually simple enough for a child to make, and using just simple butt joints, some simple butt joints reinforced with brad nails. Now that's a very traditional joint. You'll find that a lot in vintage boxes, tool chests, things like that. But we can up our game a little bit. And today we are going to do the rabbet joint, or as our friends over in Europe say, the rebate. This is just a groove along the edge of the board, but it's stronger and in my opinion just looks better than the simple butt joint. So stick with me. Let's see how it's done. All right, friends, from the Teacher's Handbook of Sloyd, we are moving to exercise 74, which is called rebating, and that is to make a rebate on the edge of the board. Of course, over here we call it rabbeting or making a rabbet, and that's what I'll be referring to it going forward. But all that is cutting a groove along the edge of the board. Now, for small Sloyd size pieces, typically this work is done with a knife and a firmer chisel. But what we're actually going to be making is a serving tray that we're going to give away as a gift. So we want to use all the tools in our arsenal. So we are going to be introducing a plow plane and probably the router plane as we do this. So let's get into making the rebate or rabbet. Before I use the walnut that I'm actually going to make the serving tray out of, I want to practice on some scraps. So I got a couple of pieces of cherry here. First thing you want to do is make sure that your ends are squared off, and that one is, and that one as well. So the rabbet offers some advantages over the simple butt joint by giving you a shelf to be able to rest the second piece on, and in my opinion just looks a little bit better. It's not much more difficult to make, and certainly not any more difficult to make than the half laps we did before. So to get started, we are going to set our marking gauge to the thickness of the mating board, and then we're going to come across and holding the marking gauge firmly against our reference surface, we'll just go ahead and score a line there and score a line on the sides. All right. Typically, you would leave your marking gauge set and you would go ahead and mark the other ends as well. But for practice, we're only going to cut the rabbet on one end. And you can see the difference between how a butt joint will look and a rabbet joint. Next thing you want to do is mark the thickness of the rebate. And just you can do it about half the width of the board or 3/4 the width of the board. It doesn't really matter. You do whatever you think looks best. Personally, I like the shelf to be, or the shoulder to be a little bit bigger, and the tenon piece, if you will, to be a little bit smaller. So we're going to actually take a second marking gauge so that we don't have to mess with that. And we're going to set it to about the 3/4 mark. And we're just doing this by eye because we're doing it by what we think looks good, not necessarily, ooh, look at that, that slipped. All right, from here now we can score a line across the top. Make sure you keep that fence nice and tight. I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to darken it in just to help see. But we're really going to depend on the gauge line itself when we go in and do our chisel work. Let's clamp the board down nice and tight to the bench, because what I want to do now is just get a bit of a knife wall in there. So we're going to go with our larger chisel. A 1/2-inch chisel would work just fine if that's all you've got. And we're going to come in here and just make this knife wall a little bit more pronounced. We're going to come in with our crosscut saw and the bench hook, put the saw in the knife wall, make sure we got it, and move that to the edge. Nice light cuts, making sure we're going straight across. Check to make sure that you are going down to the line but not past it. Almost there. We are at it on the far side, so let's do a little extra here on the near side. And then one of the mistakes I've made repeatedly is that I will cut a little bit deep on the front. I'll cut a little bit deep on the back, but I'll leave a hump there in the middle. So last thing you want to do is come in and make sure you are cutting across the middle and that you are down to your gauge line all the way. You now have two options when cutting out the waste. You can put it in the vise, and you can go in with your dovetail saw or tenon saw and cut the waste that way, and that's certainly a viable option. I tend to, because I'm still not as good with the tenon saw as I should be, I actually find it easier just to come in with your chisel and knock the waste out. So we're going to go about half the distance between the edge of the board and the gauge line and take that waste out. And again, your 1/2-inch chisel would work just fine here. I'm going with a 1-inch. Now we don't want to be too close to the gauge line because we don't know how the grain is going to react. And if you have falling grain, you could easily get too deep. So now we'll come back one more time, getting a little bit closer, but still off the gauge line. We are not all the way down to the gauge line at this point. All right, so now that we're close to the gauge line, you've got a couple of options. You can very carefully take one more pass and all the way to the gauge line. I find that a little dangerous. Okay, so at this point you can switch to your 1/2-inch chisel, and doing your paring strokes, you can clean that up. And absolutely nothing wrong with that. All right, now we're going to come in here, clamp the board nice and tight. We're going to set the depth of the router gauge and be able to clean this up around so you might be able to see better. And we're going to go all the way across. Okay. down about 1 turn now. That back up. All right, we're almost there, so let's go about 1/4 of a turn more. Right up there in that shoulder. One more, right up here, real close. Yep, that's going to be a nice joint there. That is the rabbet at the end joint used to join two boards together. The other use of the rabbet, though, is to do a groove in the long grain, and this is used when you're making a picture frame, a piece of furniture, or a box where you're wanting to recess a panel. Right, so that's what we're going to do next, is put a rabbet in the long grain. All right, when you're making your rabbet in the end grain, you can use the exact same methodology you did for the cross grain. Bring your, in this case, probably a tenon saw. You would want to cut your groove here. In the teacher's handbook of Sloyd, they actually have a specialty tool for that called a groove saw, which really has kind of fallen out of favor. But you can cut your groove and then come in with your chisel, pare that out, and then clean it up with the router plane. But we are going to now introduce the plow plane. All right, this is the Veritas small box maker's plane. The reason I like this is because most of my work is small, and this fits my hand very nicely. I also like the Veritas tools because they make both right-handed and left-handed versions. This happens to be the left-handed version, but they make the identical tool in the right-handed version. They are one of the few major tool companies that actually put out dedicated left-hand tools. All right, first thing we need to do is set our depth of cut. I have a 1/4 inch blade in here, and I want a depth of a 1/4 of an inch. So we'll set that to the 1/4 inch mark. Tighten it down, and this should give me a 1/4 by 1/4 inch cut. When you start it, you're going to start at the end. You'll actually go off the end of the board, come back, make a small, start off the end of the board, come back, make a small pass, and then with every pass, just go back a little bit further. Just keep going until you hit your depth stop. Okay, I'm now at depth. I think that gives me a nice crisp edge there. All right, now I need to do the other edge of the side piece, and we're going to do the same thing. I won't make you watch the whole thing, but it's the exact same idea. Keep the fence nice and tight. Start near the one end, and then just work your way back until you are getting complete long shaving. clearing your hear that getting a little bit of that whistling noise. Let's just put a little oil from the Rag in the Can oiler from Paul Sellers. All right, get a little bit of cardio workout there. Now, this is really what I wanted to show you. One of the beauties of the rabbet joint. If we use just a standard butt joint and we did this rabbet, or we did this, yeah, this rabbet for the recessed panel, what we're going to get is something that looks like this. And you might not be able to tell it from this angle, but you'll be able to see that rabbet from the end. So now when we look at it from the end joint, let's see. All right. See that rabbet there? All right. By doing the rebate side of things, you actually clean that joint up quite a bit. All right. So now you see how your groove is actually hidden. And when you look at it on the end, there is no rebate showing. All right, so that is truly the beauty of the rebate. Is you can put your dados in there, you can put your grooves for panels or your rebates, and they're not going to show through the other end. All right. Now, remember, I said that this joint is better than a butt joint because now you actually have two glue surfaces. You've got this glue surface and this one, which is of course end grain. Then you've got this one, which is face grain, and that one that's end grain. So you're still going to get an end grain to face grain, but now you're going to double that. But when you pull your nails in, especially if you're using antique nails, you can come in from this end and you're going to have a really strong joint. So I'm going to do that real quick, come back and show you what that looks like. All right, we're going to come in about 1/4 of an inch, about halfway. We'll make our marks there, and that just tells us where we should drill. All right. And I'm using a 1/8 inch drill bit because that is just slightly smaller than the diameter of the nail heads. We'll come in right on that line. If we were wanting this to be a permanent joint, we'd put a little glue on there, but this is just practice. So we have our rose head wrought nail. And I'm getting a little tear out over here on this side, so let's go ahead and put the drill a pilot hole all the way through. This is why we practice. All right, ooh, this is my beeswax and turpentine solution. Let's see what that's going to look like here. Again, if we were going to do this, we would actually plane off those gauge lines there. A little too much. All right, friends, what do you think about that? Rosehead wrought nails. Rosehead wrought nails. Okay. All right, well, friends, this is exercise 74 of the Teacher's Handbook of Sloyd, making the rabbet joint, as we call it, or rebate joint. I hope you enjoyed this. I think this is really going to make a nice addition to our repertoire. So until next time, go have some fun in your shop. Take care. God bless.